So would you turn to the book of Exodus chapter 2? That's where we will be today, Exodus chapter 2. If you're using one of the Bibles in the seat, that is page 45. 45. Exodus is the second book of the Bible, the second book of the Pentateuch. And we're going to do 10 verses, just 10 verses today. So Exodus chapter 2, starting in verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sisters stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because, she said, "I drew him out of the water." Father, as we look at your word today, we want to understand it. We want to hear what you're saying to us today in it. We want to see the birth of a deliverer and know that it points to our deliverer. We are a delivered people because of Jesus Christ. So Lord, may we benefit today. May you give us insight today into what you've said, and may you give us the courage to follow you in obeying whatever you have told us today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I can imagine Moses talking to his mother Jochebed and hearing this story. I imagine it's one of those family stories that get talked about over and over and over again. I can just hear it. Like we do this in our family. Like we always tell the stories. We tell baby stories and we say, you were the baby that cried a lot. You were the baby that was the happiest baby. You're the baby that puked all the time. There was that one time I held you up in the air and you puked right into my mouth. Remember that? And they don't remember it. They don't remember it at all. But you know how like, that's not always nice though, because it's almost like you're putting a label on them from the very beginning. Like this is who you are. If they could turn it around on us, I realize, there's 2 of us and 4 of them. They could get together and say, well, you were the nice parent and you were the angry parent, you were the good looking parent, right? They could totally turn this around, and now I've given them the idea to do that. So we'll just see how that goes. But I can hear Jochebed saying, "This is how it went," and Moses saying, "I got to write that down." Because this is part of the story that has to be told of God preparing a deliverer for his people and sparing that child early on. So if you were here last week, we talked about the beginning of Exodus and how the whole thing got started. The people of Israel multiplying in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh is not happy about that. He's worried about there being too many men and what happens one day if those men join their enemies and fight against the Egyptians. And so he has a 3-part plan to subjugate the people and to stop there being so many men. Part 1 is to enslave them. Hard slavery. Part 2 is, I'm going to ask the midwives to go into the women giving birth and, if it's a baby boy, to kill the baby boy. And as we saw last week, the midwives courageously said, "No, we're not going to do that." And they told Pharaoh a story about how the Hebrew women give birth before they get there. And I think that was probably a private policy. It wasn't one of those, this is the law of the land. If you see a midwife, you know what they're there for. You know, he didn't do that. It probably was very quiet, private. This is what I want you to do. But that didn't work. And so now it's a public policy. Now you get to the last verse of Exodus chapter 1, and the last verse says, Pharaoh commanded all his people, not just the soldiers, not just the midwives, it's all the people. This is a public policy. Every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. And then you have verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense now to point out their tribal ancestry and what's going on there. It may not connect with you like what's happening right there. But later you're going to find out that the Levite tribe, that Levite family is going to be a family of priests. And they're going to represent Israel to God. The priest stands between the people and God. And so Moses is born into that family. And so there's this nudging that goes on here saying, do you see? This is a special child that's born. Before you even know who a Levite is, you hear that Moses is born into the Levite family. Moses couldn't have orchestrated this, how he was born, the circumstances of his birth. So a Levite man marries a Levite woman. They have a child. And interestingly enough, the baby's not named right away. And the parents don't even get a name yet. Which is interesting because in Exodus 1, you get the names of the midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. You get their names, but you don't get Moses' parents' names, which seems to be calling attention to something else going on in the text. Because there is going to be a name coming up very soon. So they're not named, but it says in verse 2, the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Now, this is kind of interesting because the story of Moses is retold in a couple different places in the Bible, and there's a detail that's included each time this story is retold. In the book of Acts, Stephen he's the first martyr, you might remember. Stephen in the book of Acts in the New Testament gives this great speech, and he's talking about the history of Israel, and he gets to Moses. And when Stephen tells this story, he talks about how there was a child born, and God saw that the child was beautiful. And here it's, the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child. So that's interesting. God saw that he was beautiful. And then you get to the book of Hebrews, because Moses' parents are in the great hall of faith. And it says, by faith they hid Moses for 3 months. And one of the reasons they did that is because they saw that the child was beautiful or a fine child. And so in the book of Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23, there's a reason given for why they hid the child. It's because he was a fine child or a beautiful child. And all I got to know is if he was ugly, would it have been different? Yes. Yeah. I'm always worried, by the way, when I go visit people in the hospital when they have a child. Like one day they're going to pull out that child and I'm going to go in and go, whoa, you know. It's a child. Looks just like his dad, you know. It's just, oh, no. Yeah, I mean, one day it's going to happen. I don't think, though, that they saw the child and they were like, well, he is so handsome, we've got to hide him. I wasn't sure before. I don't think it's just a reference to that. The Acts passage is very curious to me when Stephen tells this story, because when he says, God saw that he was beautiful, it makes me think that maybe, and this is a big maybe, that because God had a special purpose, he looked at Moses in a different way. And maybe that's what Stephen is emphasizing in the book of Acts, that there's a special purpose. Now, by the way, Exodus 2, 1 through 10 screams at us special purpose. It's all through these first 10 verses. Otherwise, how would this story really play out in real life? if it wasn't for God's special purpose. But then there's another one, and I wonder if this is just the easiest explanation. It certainly is simple, that when a parent holds their child for the first time and they look at their child, it's always a beautiful child. It's always a special child. The word in Hebrew, by the way, is tob. And tob means, it does mean fine and beautiful, but tob also means good. And do you know where you've seen the word good before? In the book of Genesis. God created light. He saw it was good. He created the animals and saw that they were good. God created all things, and he looked, and it was beautiful, it was pleasing, it was fine, it was tob, it was good. And so God gave Moses to these parents, and they looked at him, and it was good. He was healthy. He was a fine child, and he was worth protecting. Like every child is worth protecting. Like every child is a creation of God that is meant to be hidden from danger. Thank you. That was so perfect. Did you pinch that child? Man, so good. So good. That's the baby amen, right? Or like in the Psalms when it says the cries of the infants silence the foe and the avenger. That's what that is right there. That's what it is. So thank you. Certainly one of the responsibilities of parents, of course, is to protect your child because your child's good and to communicate to them, yes, you're a sinner, my dear son, but you're so good. You're a good creation made in the image of God. Yes, my daughter, you're not perfect. You're going to have bad days. You're going to mess up. You're going to sin. You need a Savior. But you are good because God made you. Okay, so I kind of see it like that. That's kind of how I read it. I connect it to creation language. And they hid him for as long as they could. And in the Bible it says they hid him for 3 months. Can you imagine just the heightened unease and fear? It would just be a scary 3 months. Did you ever see that movie, A Quiet Place? Like with the aliens that are running around on Earth, and they don't have eyeballs, so they can't see, but they can only hear. And of course, I'm like sitting in a theater. It's very quiet in there because the movie's very quiet. I'm sitting next to my son, and we're just like edge of our seats watching this very quiet movie because every time there's a sound, there's always an alien to follow, you know. And of course, there's a baby born into it. And how do you keep the baby quiet and protect them from these creatures that are running around hearing everything with incredibly acute hearing? I always think of how weird it sounds to describe sci-fi movies in church. Like, isn't it weird? These aliens with really great ears, you know, I don't know. But if you haven't seen the movie, you're like, I don't know how to visualize that. But they put the baby in a wooden box and put oxygen in there with the baby, you know, to keep the babies. But you know, when she could hide him no longer, it says. You ever seen a baby tune up when they're about to cry? Like something happens, you know, they get a little bump or a little something happens, and they take that deep breath, and it's like silent for a moment, and they're like, and you're like 10 seconds later, and they let it out. You know what I mean? You know that thing? You've seen that, right? Oh my goodness. I should have like got my stopwatch out to see how long they could breathe in before they just released, right? And it's a blood-curdling cry. I don't like this, and I really had to get that breath before I let it out, right? I don't know, but 3 months in, and I'm guessing that Moses was pretty loud. He didn't say that in the text. I mean, I'm reading that into the text. You always got to be careful about that. But the circumstances were such that maybe he was loud, or maybe the Egyptians were just looking more intently for children. You know, whatever the circumstances were, they couldn't do any more to hide him. He was going to be given away. Don't pinch that baby anymore. I'm telling you. Okay. All right. I'm just kidding. It was so perfect, by the way. And so what Jochebed does is she waterproofs a basket. Now, literally in Hebrew, the word basket is the word ark. Where have you heard that word before, right? So you go back to Genesis, around Genesis 6, and you got a man named Noah who builds an ark, and it's to spare humanity from the judgment of God through water. And so Moses is going to be spared through water in an ark. Now, I've seen The Prince of Egypt, the DreamWorks movie. It's really good. It's got great music, got great animation. I'd recommend it. But you know that I watched the video back this week, and Jochebed takes the basket, and Miriam's like right over here watching, and she puts it in the river, and she kind of gives it that push, you know? And the basket starts going down, and then like a crocodile snaps, you know? And there's like hippos that are like moving around. And then there's like a boat throwing the net in the water and trying to pull up the fish. And the basket's like right there, you know. And then finally it drifts into the palace of Pharaoh, right? I'm looking at the text. I'm just like comparing here a little bit. And it says, she took for him a basket, this is verse 3, an ark, made of bulrushes, daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it, placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. That's not like a push. It's like I'm setting you right here, and there's reeds around, and you just need to stay right there. Just stay there. Stay. I just don't see to my mind like, oh look, there's hippos. Let's give you a good push, you know? By the way, having spent some time in Africa, in Uganda specifically, and being on a safari on the water and seeing hippos, and you're in a small boat, they are terrifying right next to you. You know, you're like, is this a good thing? Should I be on the water with these huge animals? I'm not taking anything away from her releasing her baby. She's putting the baby on the water. By the way, I remember in high school going to summer camp, and we tried to make a waterproof, we had this game we played. Everybody had cardboard and duct tape, and we had to build a boat and put it on the pond, you know, and see if it could float. But the key was you had to put somebody in it, you know? So you like took your smallest person, the smallest girl on your team, and like, I don't want to do it. You got to do it. Get in the boat. And you put her in there and pushed her out onto the pond, and then you could see which ones would sink first, you know, and all that, you know. But in any case, this one floated, and I think it was just by the reeds where it was pretty safe. I mean, as far as like, you know, she didn't push it all the way out there and with the fishermen and all that. Here's what I wish to talk to you about today. And that is something that Hebrews 11 says. In Hebrews 11:23, it says, by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months because they saw he was a fine child. We talked about that. And they didn't fear the king's edict. They did not fear. Hebrews 11:23 says, Moses' parents were not scared of Pharaoh's edict, his command to drown the baby boys. By the way, if you want to know where was Amram, the father of Moses, in this whole thing, I think the easiest answer is, well, he was working as a slave. And Jochebed was at home, and it was up to her to do something to spare her child when things got to be too intense. So, Jochebed. I believe she is an example of great faith, courageous faith. And I want to talk about that with you this morning. I believe that when it comes to our faith and living in the world we live in, we all have to have the courage of our convictions. That in the face of pressure, and for Jochebed it was pressure to give up your child, in the face of all that pressure, it requires a courageous person who trusts in God. Here's C.S. Lewis on this idea of the virtue of courage. C.S. Lewis says, courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point. the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means the point of highest reality. So what C.S. Lewis is getting at is there are different lists of virtues in the Bible. You might even argue that the fruit of the Spirit sounds like a virtue list: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. That's King James for you, just so you know. That's the way I learned it. But if you want to have self-control, temperance, if you want to be more gentle, if you want to be gentle in a not so gentle world, it's going to take courage. If you want to show love in an unforgiving world, it's going to take courage. And Lewis's point is, at some point, you will be tested. At some point, the question will be, am I going to live out what I know to be true, or am I going to crumble and fold? And it takes courage to stand by the virtues you know to be true in the face of that pressure. That takes courage. We're talking about calling in this first sermon series out of Exodus. And I know God has a calling on your life, and we're not yet to the burning bush. Like, that's weeks away from us. It's decades away from Moses. But it's weeks away for us. In fact, when you get to verse 11 in chapter 2, there's like a 40-year jump. Between Exodus 2:10 and 2:11, it's 40 years. We're not there. We're not even to Moses' calling. But I can tell you this: to live out God's purpose for your life is going to require courage of you. It's going to require it to be who God has called you to be. Now, I want to explain what that looks like for Jochebed, and hopefully we can learn some things from her. And I would include Amram in this, but specifically in Exodus 2, it is Jochebed who gets the focus. So I have 3 areas of courage I want to talk to you about and see how these land in your heart and in your life. I think each of these elements are absolutely essential as part of courage. Number 1, the courage to say no. The courage to say no. When Pharaoh issued his edict, they didn't have to appear before him and say, no, I'm not doing that. But essentially their answer was no. We're not getting in on this command. We're not doing what you say. In fact, this is exactly what the midwives did. No, we're not going to do this. And to be courageous means you're going to have to say no to the pressures around you. You're going to have to even say no to some things that are like just fine and just good in our sense of good. I don't mean good in the creation sense, but good in our sense. You have to be able to say no. Saying no doesn't come easy from some of us. I'm one of those people, like, I wonder if a lot of pastors are like this, or maybe it's just me. You know, I want to be agreeable to people, especially people in the church. I want to say yes to things. Like, that's just kind of how I'm wired. You want to ask me to do something, and I want to say yes. That's just the first thing I feel. But I've had to stop myself and ask way more often, does God want me to say yes to this? We need good boundaries in life. And to have good boundaries with people and with circumstances, you have to be able to say no, even if it disappoints you, even if it doesn't fit your plan for my life. No, I've got to do this. Now, saying no requires something of us. I really believe that being able to say no and mean it requires a moral vision. I mean, for Jochebed, I think it was pretty obvious. The issue is she's not going to obey the king's command because she has God's command. We don't obey, in our sense, just because there's a law of the land that makes something legal does not mean we look at it and say that's a good thing and I'm going to do it. We have to have the courage of our morals in order to say no. If you don't have a moral foundation, you'll say yes to a lot of things that will hurt you, that will in fact be bad for you, and you're just going with the flow. You're just saying, yes, I'll do that. I'll be that. We have to have courage to say no. I think we have to have courage to say no to our cell phones. How about that? I mean, what if you went into the new year and said, I'm going to look at this thing far less than I did last year? I'm always kind of embarrassed because every week, actually, it's during church. Does your phone actually tell you your screen time? It's during this hour, isn't it? Yeah, it is, just like me. Wow. And do you ever think, like, I'm literally worshiping and my phone buzzes, and it does it every week, and I still look at it every week. During worship, I pull it out, and I'm like, well, let's see. You average 5 hours, 8 minutes of screen time per day this week. It's right there. What's yours? Look at it right now. Pull it out. Look at it. Okay. You're down 13%? Okay, let's just do this. If you got your phone out, how many of you are under 5 hours a day? Under. Oh, bless you. Bless you. There you go. How many of you are over 5 hours? Be honest. All right. My wife's looking. Yours is bad? Yeah, yours is really bad. It's really bad. It's work. Yeah, it's work. Yeah. I know. So's mine. Mine's all work. It's never Facebook. Okay. So here. Do you have the courage to say, I'm with somebody and whatever they need, it doesn't matter right now. I'm with God this morning. And so whatever they need, it's okay. I know on the morning like this morning, and it's really cold, you want to make sure your kids are okay. And I get it. Hey, stop looking at your phone. Seriously, it's over. That part of the sermon's over. You can stop. Man, people are texting. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But can you exercise wisdom and know when to say no and when to say yes? Can you do that? Do you have the courage to say no? Do you have the courage to say no when someone wants you to join them in an activity that you know is not the best for you? Do you have the courage to say no to that interested romantic person that you know is not right? Can you say no to them? Or is the need for a romantic partner just too strong for you? See, if you don't have a moral vision, you say yes to all of that. Can you say yes to a controlling person in your life when they push your boundaries? Can you say no? I just can't do this. It takes a fear of God, and that is precisely what Hebrews 11:23 is getting at. They didn't fear the king's command. They feared God. Remember our midwives? It says they were God-fearers. And so when you fear God more than you fear people, you're able to tell people no. Are you one of those people that like saying yes to people like me? Like if that's you, I am talking to you today, and now you can't say I wasn't talking to you. It was directly for you. This was for you. You've got to practice forming the words in your mouth and saying no. No. Or I'll pray about it and then no. I don't know. Yeah, I know. I see you up there. You really need to do this. A lot more people need to hear no from you than last year. Let's put it that way. Okay. Now, sometimes I really, I'm almost like jealous of people. Like you watch like America's Got Talent. And the judges are watching these people perform. And sometimes you're watching the people perform on TV and you're like, they're awful. I mean, seriously, they don't have any talent. They're at the bottom of America's Got Talent. I would not watch them. I would not pay to see their show in Las Vegas. I've never been to Vegas, but if I was, I wouldn't go see them. And then you start the judges going down the line, and the judges are like, yeah, it was so good. That was the best thing. Golden buzzer, and all this stuff. And then you got the judge at the end, and he's always like, that was trash, I'm just jealous of the judge that can say, no. That's got to be better. That was not good enough. Do you understand that you're going to say, let's use the word good as Tob, the word good in the story. Fine, beautiful. You're going to say yes to some less than Tob things unless you know what Tob is, what is really good. And then you got to have your Bible open for that. So you got to have the courage to say no. Number two. You also have, by the way, you are a great congregation on this really cold day. I mean, I feel like you're really there. Okay. Number 2, you got to have I was preparing myself for the worst, I'll tell you, the courage to let go. You got to have the courage to say no, but you got to have the courage to let go. Cue the Frozen soundtrack or something, but let it go. And here's what Jochebed has to do. Like I told you earlier, I don't think she was like giving the huge shove and watch out for the hippo, baby, I don't think it was that at all. I think it was like placing the basket carefully among the reeds. I actually found one scholar that wondered if she was planning to go back for him later, like when danger had passed. Like, I really don't know. In my mind, his sister Miriam was watching because this was really letting go. It was truly saying, this is my child and I'm releasing him into the river. By the way, you know that Jochebed technically obeyed Pharaoh's command. Put your baby in the Nile River, See? So she technically kept the law. I know, spirit of the law, she did not. She put her baby in an ark, called back to Noah, and put the baby in the water. I noticed that it says when she couldn't hide him anymore after 3 months. And we talked about that, like maybe he was loud, or maybe just the Egyptian awareness of children was growing, and maybe they were going into houses looking for baby boys. Like, we don't know what was going on there, but she had to give an honest assessment. And here's the thing. It is so hard to let something go when you feel like you need to control it. So hard. Like, I want to be in charge of this circumstance in my life, and yet God is calling me to give it over to Him. That's really hard. But to get there and to really do that, you have to make the honest assessment. That's what Jochebed did. I can't hide him any longer. I've tried. I've done my work. I've done everything. I've lived on. I've been walking on eggshells, pins and needles, whatever your analogy is. She's been doing it, and she's felt the trepidation every day. Is this the day they find out? Think of how scary that is. And finally she said, I can't do it anymore. I think the only way for my child to live is to actually let him go. Here's my question for you. What's in your basket? What's in your ark? That sounds like a Capital One commercial. What's in your basket? Like what thing that matters to you so much you tend to almost idolize it? What is that thing? Or that situation that you're going to control if it's the last thing you do. You are not turning it over to God. You're not releasing it. You are doing what you need to do to it. By the way, I don't think that releasing control means don't do anything, because I see a mother who did everything she could. I think it's kind of like when you read Psalm 46, famous verse, be still and know that I am God. Context of Psalm 46, battle, war. There's a time to get the swords out and a time to put them down and say, I've done everything I can, because be still actually literally means cease. Cease and know that I am God. And she protected her baby so well for 3 months. And she had to put the baby in the water and say, I'm going to cease now. I'm just going to pray, but I'm going to cease the active protection, and I just got to release him. So my question to you is, what's in your basket that you've been holding on to too tightly? What is God bringing to your mind right now? And are you willing to put that basket in the water and leave it with God and say, God, whatever you do? I'm going to say one more time, that doesn't make you lazy. I mean, lazy Christians would sit on their sofa all day, and don't do anything, and they think somehow that's spiritual maybe, but this is not opposed to work. She made that basket waterproof, and that was work. But she had to release the basket too. So there's brokenness in your life. What can you do about broken relationships? Well, you can do so much, but then you got to release the basket and just say, I'm giving this to God. I can't control that person. I can't control that situation. And it takes courage to say, I'm just giving it to God. He knows what to do. I don't know what it is for you, but I pray that you'll have the courage to release. Then, verse 5, verse 4, the sister, who is likely to be Miriam, she'll figure into the story in a big way later. She watches to see what's going to happen. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. Doesn't it make you wonder, all the questions I want to ask Jochebed right now, which would be, did you know that's where Pharaoh's daughter hung out? Or was that just I'm picking that spot this day and God orchestrated it all? I just want to ask. Because wouldn't it have been like there's a little bit of strategy going on here, maybe I think that's a kind woman and I think we're going to put the baby where she will find him. I just don't know. I don't know. I know this though. I know that 9 times out of 10, an Egyptian finds a baby boy in a basket, and I know what happens next. They're thrown out of it. That's it, and that's the end of it. 9 times out of 10, that's what happens, but not this day. Not this day. Miriam watches. Pharaoh's daughter's out there. She has a rebellious streak in her. And Miriam has an incredibly courageous streak in her. Could you imagine watching? It says she's watching to see what would happen. Can you imagine the fear in a young woman, a young girl, to say, what's going to happen to my baby brother, and I'm going to watch it go down? 9 times out of 10, that does not end well. And that little girl is scarred by what she sees. But not this day. There's the courage to say no, the courage to let go, and here we go. The courage to follow. The courage to follow. Can you follow a plan that's not yours? Can you do that? Can you follow God's plan when it doesn't look like what you expected it to look like? Can you submit yourself to Him and what He wants for your life? Can you follow? I've noticed this for, 10 years, 15 years, that colleges, and it was same for my seminary experience, they always want to talk about training leaders. We're going to make leaders. I don't know any college or seminary or church that says, we want to train a bunch of good followers. But I believe that followership is equally important to leadership. In fact, as a leader, if you don't know how to follow, I wonder if you know how to lead. In fact, I think that there's plenty of people today that say, this is the way the world should be, but they have no idea how to follow somebody else. They just want to be God in their own little world. You do what I say. You say what I say. You affirm what I say. You affirm me. And it's all about me, me, me. And I just want to know, do you know how to follow somebody else? Do you know how to recognize a proper authority and say, I'm following that person? I wonder that about the church sometimes in election seasons. Do you know how to see somebody and say, there's a person that I would follow? Do we know? It takes courage to say that God has a better plan than I have, and I have things in my life that I want to see happen. Places I want to visit, places I might want to live, people I want to meet, someone I want to marry. We have all this list of things that ought to happen. A comfortable retirement might be in that plan. There's all of these things. And then God says, no, but following me means this. Can you do this? Are you a good follower? Or do you only see yourself as a good leader? I see Miriam, and I see an incredible follower. How do I know that Miriam's an incredible follower? Because followers aren't just, I know sheep, we use sheep sometimes in a negative sense, like you're a sheep, you just follow, stupid things. Here's Miriam, though. She sees Pharaoh's daughter, and she's like, hey, I got a plan. I know someone that can nurse that baby. You want me to get her? Yes, as a matter of fact, and I'll pay her. Oh, now you're getting paid to take care of your child. There's a good idea. Pay to take care of children. Okay, yeah, okay. And that's what happened. That's just what happens. Miriam is flexible on the spot and says, I think I see a plan. I think I see what God is doing, and I want to enter into it. I want to be part of it. Hey, and she ends up leading, doesn't she? Isn't she leading in that moment? Hey, Pharaoh's daughter, I got an idea. And that's the idea. This is the family. And the follower ends up leading. That's the follower that I want to follow. And then Jochebed, of course, she has to adjust to the new plan as well. Oh, I'm now going to take care of my child for a number of years, perhaps. But eventually I got to release my child back. By the way, as a parent, isn't that like the hardest thing about parenting? Like, when you can hold them, you think that they're all yours, but you certainly realize right away they're actually God's. They're not yours. You're called to parent them, love them, discipline them. And then as they get older and older and older, it's that slow process of fully releasing. But spiritually speaking, aren't they already released to the Lord? Don't they already belong to Him? And she had to release Moses. So the courage to follow is the courage to say, not my plan, not my will, but yours be done. I will follow wherever that is and whatever that means. I'm in. And throw some hard things into my life and into my story, and I will still follow. Now, let's talk about Moses' name and wrap this up. Okay, Moses' name. So it says, this is verse 9. Verse 10, actually, the child grew older. She brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. He became her son. She named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of the water. This is what I've always wanted to know. So Pharaoh's daughter named Moses, Moses. But Moses is a Hebrew name. It's Moshe, and Moshe means to be drawn out of water. By the way, here's a really cool passage that kind of plays on Moses' name. It's Isaiah 63:11. Then he remembered the days of old of Moses and his people. Where is he who brought them up out of the sea? So what is he talking about there? He's talking about how Moses led the people of Israel through the Red Sea, sometimes called the Reed Sea. Where was Moses placed? In the reeds. You see? So Moses is placed in the Nile River among the reeds. One day he will grow up and he will lead the people of Israel out of Egypt through the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds. All of this is planned from the beginning. God knows the whole story. He's got the whole thing. And Moses' name means, now here's my problem. It means drawn out of water in Hebrew. You're drawn out of water. Isaiah 63:11 is an example of that, drawing them through the water of the Red Sea. Now, I'm thinking this. Did the daughter of Pharaoh actually name him a Hebrew name? Like what? Like she's Egyptian. But the word Mose, in Egyptian, that's not M-O-E apostrophe S, by the way. It's M-O-S-E. Mose means son or born. Mose. It's a very common element of Egyptian names, and they usually put a name at the front of it like Tutmos, son of Toph, or Ramses, son of Ra. And so what they would do is, you got the name Mose, and you put the God's name in front of it. So here's the God, and there's the name Mose, so it's son of that God. But Moses, according to Pharaoh's daughter, had no parents. And so you don't need a God's name there or a son of this man. It would just be son. Because who knows who his parents are? And who knows who his father is? And so he was Moses, and probably just meaning son or born. But interestingly, in Hebrew, Moshe, which is similar to Mose, means to draw out of water. I can't control the name that my parents named me. You couldn't control the name your parents named you. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. But isn't it incredible to see God's providential hand in all of this? What is God doing? And why can you have courage to face your calling, to face your culture, to face your world? How can you have culture? Well, when you trust in God's providence, that He's got a plan, He's got a story for you, when He can bring about the birth and protection of His deliverer, which will foreshadow Jesus's mighty delivering of us. You see, Moses would lead people through the Red Sea. Jesus would lead us into new life and new birth. God's providence makes us brave. God's got this. He will take care of this. We can trust Him. So let me ask you once more as we close. What do you need? How do you need to say no? What do you need to let go? And how do you need to follow? And if you have courage and you really trust that God has a plan, it's bigger than you, deeper than you. You couldn't make it happen. You can't control your own name and you can't control God's plan. But you can trust Him and you can walk in that calling. It's just going to take some courage. Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for this time that we've had today and how you call us to be bold. You call us into something bigger than ourselves. You call us into this big redemptive story where Jesus is the hero and we're the followers. Father, I pray that you would give the church excellent leaders that know how to follow. I pray that you give the church excellent followers who know how to lean into your plans and your ways. Father, I pray for anyone here that has something in the basket that's really, really, really hard to let go. And I pray that maybe even now in the quietness of these moments, they would give it to you, that they would release it and trust you. Your hands are capable. You ordain our steps. So maybe respond with worship to who you are in the time that we have remaining now. In Jesus' name, amen.